Well, let me just give you a sense of what we know so far about this. There's still a few unanswered questions, but finally we got the detail on what Donald Trump meant by this Liberation Day. And let me just kind of start by showing you these bars are how high those tariffs, the US tariffs, are on various different countries around the world at the moment, or rather before Donald Trump came into office, and a quick kind of bit of revision on where we've come from so far. So threatened tariffs on Mexico and Canada. They were repeatedly threatened, repeatedly rescinded or lifted, but they might well be back again, who knows. But for the time being, they're gone. We know we got an extra 10% tariffs on China, China 1.0, then another extra 10% tariffs on China 2.0, you might call them. And we're now kind of waiting to find out what happened next. And we finally did find it out. Let's just start. There are two parts to this, OK? So first of all, there is going to be a 10% baseline tariff. So you see all of these bars go up by 10%, including, of course, the UK. But that, as far as the White House is concerned, is just a baseline. And then on top of that, there are different tariffs for different nations, what they call reciprocal tariffs. And they say they've gone through the numbers. They've looked at not just the tariffs that other countries around the world are charging the US, but also what they call non-tariff barriers, so other things. And they've worked out, by the way, Canada, those Mexico-Canada tariffs might well come back, so we might well start from that position. But reciprocal tariffs might push all of these bars, or will push all of these bars up considerably higher. So just look at how the picture of trade and tariffs in the US has changed dramatically as a result of these measures which are coming in the next few days. And just to give you a few highlights of what we're talking about, so you could look, for instance, over there at China. So China, that's a 34% reciprocal tariff, but it takes the total amount, provided that goes on top of the existing tariff, it takes the total amount up above 50%. And you're talking, you know, when tariffs are going above 50%, that makes any trade very, very difficult and far less likely to happen. So that's China, but you can probably see here Vietnam as well. And the point here from the White House has been to say, listen, lots of Chinese goods going into the US, but also going through, being Vietnam and Cambodia as well, being conduits for goods to go to America. And the point here from Donald Trump is that the US wants to reindustrialise. And so it's all about trying to make things domestically. But finally, look at the UK, 10% on the UK. And for many people here, obviously, it is a big increase on where things were before, only a few percent, the average rate for the UK. But that goes up to 10%. It is the best rate that anyone has amongst any nations. In fact, the best rate that any G7, any leading economy in the world has, and certainly better than the EU, all of whom are having to pay an extra 20% in total, so 10% and another 10% on top. But even so, all of this will potentially diminish the amount of trade going on around the world and diminish the amount of stuff going into the US. And finally, it's worth just saying, what was the stock market reaction? Well, this decision was made after markets had closed, but we can look at the futures market. This is the Nasdaq futures market, and look at what happened. It went up a little bit after the announcement, and then it's come down quite considerably. So a market reaction there, which implies that when markets open in Asia, and indeed when they were open across the US and Europe, we're going to see some falls to come as people respond to this.
Ed, take a seat. I've got another question for you. There is more coming out of the White House right now, senior White House officials, etc. Trump is to sign an order that closes the de minimis loophole. This is according to an aide. Tell us why that is significant and how it might affect a nation like China, for example. So this is on top of all of those things we were showing you. De minimis basically means that for really small, kind of low-value items that are going in and out of countries, a lot of that stuff just isn't charged a tariff. So what is a tariff ultimately? It is just, you know, we're going to charge you 20% on everything that comes into the country, although it's the recipient that actually pays it. But for fast fashion, for items that are going in that are relatively cheap, and this is a big thing for China, you know, you've got companies like Shein who are sending stuff relatively cheaply from Guangdong and different parts of China. Right now, that's not subject to any tariffs. Donald Trump said earlier on, so when he had one of his early kind of, we're going to impose tariffs on China, he said, we're getting rid of de minimis. But then what happened was that suddenly
in airports around the US, you were seeing massive big piles of goods that no one was quite sure what to do with, because it's an enormous administrative challenge. And I think that, Anna, is the bigger issue here. Raising all of these tariffs, different tariffs on different countries, and a kind of extraordinary smorgasbord of different numbers we've just seen, and Donald Trump, held up this chart of all of different numbers. It is likely to just increase the amount of work that it takes for America to collect these tariffs. But the point that Donald Trump wants to make, can I show one more chart, like as a bonus thing? But the point that Donald Trump wants to make is that back in a long time ago, the majority of federal revenues came from tariffs, raising money from tariffs, and right now that line is basically down, close to zero, kind of only a few percent. And his point is always, rather than raising money through income tax, couldn't we raise it again through tariffs? And I'll spare you the next charts, but point out that ultimately that is really, really tough to do. It's really tough in the modern world of 2025, when you have, welfare states, when you have Medicare, when you have, standing armies that are quite expensive. You can't just raise all of your money through tariffs. No one has been able to do that. And so that is the challenge that he's faced with right now. But what he wants to do is to be able to say, we're going to try and reindustrialise, hence all of those tariffs on China, on Vietnam, on Cambodia, and we're going to try and raise a bit of money from it in the process. And I think that's the selling point. But what comes next is the retaliation. We start to hear from, Europe, and we know they're going to retaliate. What comes next is more market reaction. And this is going to roll and roll. Even though we've got detail tonight, we're going to be talking about this for many weeks and months to come.